This is the world that you know. The world as it was at the end of the 20th century. It exists now only as part of a neural interactive simulation that we call the Matrix. You've been living in a dream world, Neo. This is the world as it exists today. Welcome to a method to the madness.
Welcome back to our Matrix Quadrilogy series. I'm your host, Mitchie, and joining me as always is Patrick.
Hello.
And David.
Hello.
So this is our last podcast on the Quadrilogy, right? The Matrix Resurrections we'll be covering, the 2021 film starring Keanu Reeves, Carrie-Anne Moss, not Lawrence Fishburne and Hugo Weaving, but rather Jessica Henwick, Jonathan Groff, and Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. So we've got a new cast, which is cool. And I don't know what to say. I'm just keen to get stuck into this because I feel like there's going to be a lot of, this is going to be a contentious podcast because David here has some controversial opinions, so to speak, about the Matrix Resurrections. Interested to hear your opinions, Pat. And you probably know the angle I have on this hasn't changed since watching it a second time after watching it when it first came out. But we'll get stuck into that soon. Perhaps we'll start with first opinions. Who went first? David. What do you think of this film?
It's a good question. Look, I first saw this sort of, I didn't see it in theaters because that was sort of peak lockdown COVID stuff. But I remember watching it at the time and not really getting the reason for this film to like exist. Like I watched it and I was like, oh, there was some interesting stuff in there, but like I didn't quite get it, I suppose. And I've written about it a little bit in the past, and I think about this film a lot. And I've since revisited it, a couple times since then. And coming back to it now, I think it's solidified for me the things that I'm really interested in this film and the things that I think are really compelling. But ultimately, I think as an entire project, it struggles under the necessity to exist. It doesn't quite find a reason to be, but I still really enjoy the way it talks about itself and talks about those other films in this film, and some of the ideas levied in particular, some of the ideas around like, what being the one means in a new context. Obviously the meta commentary is kind of interesting to me, and the character drama still works for me a lot of the time in this. So I am definitely the Matrix Resurrection defender of everybody I know. But I'm willing to admit there are some flaws that kind of are pretty obvious to me. But then what they do with those flaws, I find pretty interesting.
Okay. Interesting. So not totally positive.
No, but
you don't love this film.
No, but I love a lot of the ideas in it, and I love a lot of what they swing for with the stuff in it. But I'm not, by no means do I think that every flaw is on purpose and should be defended. But I think certainly some of the choices that people have criticized, I find really interesting and compelling in the meaning they produce, even if it doesn't necessarily make the film enjoyable to consume, which is kind of what I remember in the first podcast. I was like, the closer the films get to embodying the philosophy, the less interesting they become or the less compelling they become to consume as films. I think this is kind of the embodiment of that.
Yep. Pat, what do you think?
I've seen this film twice. Both films are still in a haze for me. This film, it's so, I don't know, it's
a good word for it, a haze.
It is this like trip of a film, like it in not necessarily like a great way, in a way that is not very cohesive in between moments and in between scenes and stuff like that. It has this inexplicable off kilter, just odd tone to it. And I get that sort of does play into the diegesis of the plot, with like how there is this new matrix that's meant to be off. Neo's life isn't quite right. But it works in a couple different ways. Like it distinguishes itself from the original trilogy, but it also, I kind of think, maybe a bit unintentionally distances itself too far from the original. It just feels so different. However, I think in terms of fourth films of franchises, this has got to be one of the best fourth films in a franchise.
What's an example of another fourth film?
Exactly. It's competing up against classics like Pirates of the Caribbean, on Stranger Tides.
Isn't that I forgot that one exists.
And Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Some heavy hitters.
You mean Harry Potter and the sports one?
Yeah, that one.
That Pirates of the Caribbean is a good juxtaposition, because that's basically a trilogy, and then they made another film.
Yeah.
It's ongoing though.
I am sort of joking about this, by the way. Usually, because and the Leprechaun 4, of course, the things it's competing against. So I think
idea what that is.
As with the other films, it has a sort of, at least it has a, as David said, it tries to swing for something. It has some sort of direction and a vision, which is what all of these films have. So for that's why I think this is maybe worthwhile is not a good term, but it's a good shot at making a fourth movie. Yeah.
Can I drop a bomb? Can I drop a bomb on you, Pat?
Yeah.
One of the best films of recent memory is a fourth film. You just forget about it because of what it is. Mad Max Fury Road is in fact the fourth Mad Max film.
Oh,
that's a good one. Yeah.
So that's kind of like a reboot, isn't it? I haven't seen the others.
Yeah. Well, it's the same. There was a trilogy, and then they made another one years later.
With the same actors, with the same story?
Well, different actors, but the story's the same, which is it's stories theoretically being told about characters in this world. So it's the same continuity, even if it's different actors.
Has a new one.
Really good. I had a great time. Yeah, I had a great time.
Interesting. Yeah. I like Fury Road.
If you can sneak in to see it at the theater, like if it's still on in cinemas, I don't know what a lot of stuff goes to streaming quite quickly. If you can see Furiosa in theaters, I'd recommend it.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I suppose, that's kind of one thing I would have liked to have seen, is that instead of this film, is that like, rather than doing like an actual sequel, it could just be like some sort of reboot, really, without the same actors and stuff. And they kind of half did that with this film, and then half didn't, and that's for me one of the problems with it.
When did you first see it, Mitchie? Like
in the cinemas?
Really?
Yeah. Because as you know, I love the original trilogy. I love the first Matrix film with an intense passion as a child, and so when this came out, I was like, when it was announced, I was like, oh, great, a fourth Matrix film. Like, I had an inkling that it might not turn out so good, but still, I was excited to watch it, see what happens and whatnot, because who knows, the world's their oyster. Like, you could make the movie anything you want. And then, of course, I was naturally very, very extremely disappointed, akin to how I was disappointed with the new Doctor Who, actually, how it kind of like, has some sort of personal connection to my childhood, and then it's ruined kind of thing. Which, very well might have something to do with just me rather than the movie itself. But I definitely do think that this movie is not perfect. Yeah, I don't know. For me, it's a lackluster film. I don't enjoy watching it, and I've seen it twice now, and I don't know. I'm keen to get into it and break it down, the rationale behind the movie itself, or the kind of meta illusions within it, and what the whole point of it is. But I don't know. I just don't feel like it has the same energy and the same vibes of the original films, and so yeah, I'm not a fan.
It's similar to what Pat said, I think. You guys, just before the film came out, you guys did a Digression Collection episode predicting the plot of The Matrix 4.
Yeah, what the fuck?
This was
True.
before it had a title. Now,
Oh my god.
Now, in that episode, Pat predicted that. I want to point out two things in this short 8-minute video podcast where you guys are predicting the plot of The Matrix. You guys successfully failed to predict the plot of The Matrix 4. However, Pat came up with the extremely good pitch of a title as The Matrix Rebooted.
Yeah.
Strong title.
I stick by that.
And Pat wanted the film to center or begin on kind of undercutting the original franchise, with Neo realizing that taking the red pill isn't such a bad idea, and sort of being a subversion of that in some way. It kind of is,
kind of on it
in a different direction.
So what did we say in that? Like, clearly, you know our podcast better than we do. Well, better than me anyway. I don't even vaguely remember what we said in that.
Yeah, well, that's what Pat said. So he was kind of pitching that Neo would be kind of on board with people taking the red pill and kind of living in ignorance in some way. Like maybe Trinity's death, they don't bring her back, and he can't bear to live with the pain, sort of thing. You know, those kinds of ideas. Mitchie, your predictions were well off. What
did I even say?
You said the two predictions you made were that it won't be set after the third film, but it will be set after Neo has awoken in the first film. So you were pitching like a sidequel or something.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Something that I already kind of referred to before as, well, not really, I suppose, but sort of like a Fury Road kind of thing, right? Where it's not directly following or directly kind of in line.
Yeah, you wanted it to be like an anthology where it's like taking place in the Matrix, but like not focused on our main characters.
Video game setting, AAA video game setting.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Maybe they should have just made a video game, The Matrix Resurrections, rather than making a movie, The Matrix Resurrections, while alluding to some arbitrary video game within it. That's the Matrix trilogy made by Neo, aka Thomas Anderson. Anyway.
Arbitrary is a bold adverb to bolt onto the front of that. Should we do the summary so we can...
It all seems arbitrary to me. That's why I'm keen to talk about it. Yeah, let's do the plot summary.
Bugs, a human in the real world, discovers old Matrix code running the story of the One, who has become a legend. She finds Morpheus, and they both resolve to find the One. Neo has once again become Thomas Anderson, now a famous game developer known for his creation of the Matrix Trilogy, a hit video game series following the story of the original Matrix trilogy. Thomas sees a psychiatrist, presumably due to mental health issues, where he is unable to distinguish his dreams from reality. His psychiatrist prescribes him blue pills, which keep mental attacks at bay. One day, Thomas decides not to take them while Bugs and Morpheus track him down for extraction. While Neo is extracted from the Matrix, he notices Trinity in the pod next to him. Despite his pleas to save her, Bugs and her crew take Neo to Io, the new Zion, where Niobe is the leader. She reveals that 60 years have passed since the end of the Machine War, after which the peace Neo had guaranteed was only temporary. Various insurrections and wars between machine factions and humans came to be due to power shortages caused by humans leaving the Matrix. Bugs and Neo resolve to save Trinity. Neo enters the Matrix, where Neo's psychiatrist is revealed to be the Analyst, the machine entity who resurrected Neo and Trinity after their deaths to discover more efficient ways of drawing power from them. They make a deal. If Trinity cannot be convinced to leave the Matrix, Neo will return to his pod. As Neo tries to convince Trinity of her previous life, Bugs and her crew successfully extract her physical form. Trinity recalls her past life, and she and Neo escape the Matrix. Later on, they confront the Analyst, promising to right the wrongs he created.
Nice. Where do we begin with this?
I mean, I guess the setup, right?
The setup?
Like the thing, the modal, and like where Neo finds himself, right? Because that's kind of like the whole shtick of the meta commentary.
What's the modal again? That's like
it's a little matrix he's created inside the Matrix, basically.
Right, and that's where we are at the beginning of the movie, which happens to be a total recreation of the first scene from the Matrix.
Yes, because Bugs is hacked into it, and she's watching it. And what I love is that it's the exact same thing as the original Matrix, but it's all kind of wrong. You know, like the camera angles are slightly wrong for like where you're seeing Trinity from. Her hair is slightly wrong and like her clothes are slightly wrong. But it's like close enough that it feels really eerie. You know how in the first two recordings we did, we talked a lot about the concept of the Matrix as this question of like whether it's an imitation of the territory, right? So the mapped territory, if it's the territory itself. What I love in this film is that it just takes that to like the extreme, where it's this isn't even the Matrix that we're seeing, and it's not the original events, it's not the territory of the original film, and even then it's like it's a simulation within the film that is
Right.
set in the Matrix. It's just like it.
Right. I can see that what you're saying. But is there any more depth to it than that? Like, because quite literally they do that, right, with the first scene. It's like a recreation of the first scene from the Matrix. But I just don't understand what the point of this scene is in the grand scheme of the movie. It never seems to be revisited that, this happens to be other Matrix versions running these modals, so to speak. Yeah, I don't know. Why did they do that? Aside from it being just a nostalgia trip, like what's the point of the first scene?
The point of the modal and the first scene is that it allows Neo to self-produce Morpheus, because if you recall, Morpheus is extracted from that modal, and so I think the idea is that it's Neo subconsciously running this again and again and again in the hopes that the outcome that happened previously could happen again, which is that he's freed and he finds Trinity.
Interesting. So Morpheus is created within the modal he created, who somehow breaks out and then extracts him.
No, so Bugs extracts Morpheus from the modal.
True. Okay. Yep. And right. And then together, Morpheus being a key part of extracting the one, or Neo, they extract Neo. So like Neo kind of, you're saying he creates this video game modal thing subconsciously in an attempt to kind of extract himself.
Yeah, you can exactly. You can think of it as the same instigating factor that happens at the start of the first film, where he's he's selling a hack basically, in the same way, which is obviously subverting the systems around him. In the same way, this modal is him effectively hacking this new Matrix. He just doesn't really know it.
Yeah, I was going to say it does have a lot of parallels with the first film in that it starts off where Neo's in this world that is wrong slightly, and he just doesn't know how or why it's wrong, and he has these inklings of truth. And if you're against the world, then you're trying to hide it from the world. Therefore, like, he can justify creating this modal as just him sort of tinkering with his game development or something like that. It's a subconscious like rebellion, I suppose, and a pursuit of what he thinks of as what he needs to do as truth.
Right, and that feeds neatly into the question that Mitchie was putting forward before, which is like, why do any of this? Like, why include any of this? And I think Bugs early on has a line that encapsulates this, where Bugs says, she goes, "Why would someone use old code to make something new?" Right, which is the first inkling that this film is a film talking about itself, right? And you get the brilliant scenes early on, which kind of, just to piggyback off what Pat said, Morpheus sweeps Bug as they're trying to escape. Morpheus kind of shunts Bugs through these back doors into the modal's version of Neo's apartment, which we can tell is obviously wrong. Like, however Neo's remembered this, it just looks wrong. Or it's Neo's apartment, but what if in the age of smartphones, right? Like, what if not the 90s? And there's something in here about Bugs says that the red pill is an illusion. Like, the red pill and the blue pill, the choice is an illusion. You already know what you have to do. And that's kind of mirroring the Oracle, who goes, because you didn't come here to make the choice, you've already made it. You're here to understand why you made it. And it's sort of like, I think it's pitching itself as a refraction of that opening, of the original Matrix film, but then it gets into a different space and does different things with it when we meet Smith, basically. I think that's when the film really lays its thesis out of like what it wants to do with all of this stuff. But for my money, at least, that's why the film starts the way it does and kind of has those elements.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I kind of, now that you've explained it to me, I'm somewhat convinced that what the purpose of the first scene is. Yeah, it's interesting. Starting off the fourth film with the same thing from the first film, it's like it's a difficult thing to execute, I guess, because nostalgia and pulling on people's heartstrings of memory and nostalgia is kind of a typical thing to do, and sometimes it just kind of feels like they're doing that,
Well, I mean, it's a thread that runs through this movie, that it's like in conversation with the cultural moment of IPs being rebooted and rebranded and made again. So
it kind of fits in then.
Yeah, it's not a particularly cutting edge thing to do in your story in 2020s, but like it's declaring itself that like it's going to stick with that theme, I suppose. Like yeah. It's not just a vapid sort of like homage or a head nod or something like that. It's like, no, this is what the movie's going to be about.
Right. It's
true.
It's broadcasting. This is the film that you're here to see.
Yeah.
And like to the recasting and stuff like that. I think that's deliberate to not bring back the original cast, right? To make it feel like it's almost like a cheap knockoff or a reboot or like a side reboot, or like nothing kind of clicks quite right. The dojo looks different. This Morpheus is kind of different,
there's a bunch of little beats, like how Morpheus is a bit silly. He's like drunk or something when they pull him out. And I've never wore different glasses before. It's just like, I don't know. That first scene kind of does like hook you into like, what is this going to be about? Like, where is this movie going? Yeah.
Admittedly, I actually, don't think the first scene's like it's fun and I enjoyed it, I suppose. It's kind of interesting that we're talking about this though, because it's like, okay, so it's trying to be sort of like self-aware about what it's doing, and that's the point of the first scene. It's not just a stereotypical homage that every movie and TV show does a lot these days. So then therefore it's kind of acting a little bit ridiculous in itself, but then that's kind of also why I don't really like the film, ironically, just and that's personal to my opinion, but like just its silliness is kind of a bit like absurd to me. And but then that's kind of the point, right? Is what you're saying, like the point of the movie is to be like that. It's trying to challenge what the original trilogy was about and whatnot. But like,
not even. I
don't know if it works for me.
Not challenge it. The film thinks the film is silly,
right? Which
the film doesn't want to exist.
Exactly. Okay. Right. And I can understand that with the whole the backdrop of why this movie was created. So then I guess they kind of dug their own grave with this. It was never going to be great by the sounds of it. Yeah.
And what basically it seems to me that Lana took the opportunity to take $150 million of Warner Brothers money and say fuck you for threatening to do this without us.
And only one of them, right, of the Wachowskis.
Yeah, it was just Lana. Yeah.
Have you guys read the Wikipedia of like the development of this film? It says that it doesn't say anything about it does have a sentence about Warner Brothers approach the Wachowskis every year in order to make another one, but it doesn't say really anything about like coercion or sort of pressure or anything like that. It just says, and then eventually when the Wachowskis' parents died, Lana suddenly felt the need to write this script so she could reconnect with characters that she thought she lost, and it's a way to process her grief or whatever.
Oh, because I read that they just Warner Brothers would say that they said that they were going to just hire another director or something like that.
Yeah.
And so that's when
that sounds like marketing. The thing Pat just read sounds like a marketing thing.
Yes.
From, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. That's sort of like you feel that insincerity in this film. Maybe not insincerity. There's kind of like just a bad faith about this movie. Like it just doesn't want to be here.
Bad faith is right. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's it's difficult because it's trying so hard not to be like sort of perfunctory and spiritless. Like it's trying hard with the pieces it has, and it's just, and I maybe that's this off kilter tone I'm feeling when I watch this film. It just doesn't have the energy or the sort of like creativity to try and match the previous films. Something off.
Yeah, there's just something about it. It's really off, but then like we say, if that's kind of the backdrop of the whole creation of it, it kind of makes sense now. But it's like, why didn't they just do something entirely different? Like, ask Pat and me about what we thought 3 years ago, and pitch one of those ideas. I wrote that down because
I thought you were going to say, why didn't Warner Brothers ask us to fucking consult on this film?
Yeah, well, based on our digression podcast, we actually that probably would have been a much better idea.
We can't assume that they didn't watch it, so which must mean they watched it and then they just disregarded it, which is even more rude.
Again, to be fair, you guys barely predicted anything. Like, you spent the whole 8 minutes trying not to predict what was going to happen. It's a wild listen.
Fair enough, but we kind of did comment on the fact that maybe something without the original characters would be best. Sort of like what they did with Mad Max, right?
Yes.
Like, you can't call that a sequel to the trilogy, Fury Road. I don't know. Actually, I can't really say that. I haven't even seen the original films, but that's what I gathered before, that you can't really call that a sequel, right? Necessarily in the same way that this is a sequel where it literally follows on from the ending of Matrix Revolutions. You have Neo and Trinity, but not Morpheus, unfortunately. And then they literally resurrect them from death to bring them back into the movie, to bring them back into the fourth film. It's just so bad. Like, I don't know, it's very personal, I guess, but like for me, it's like, why didn't you just let that be and then create a new story, I
mean, the film tells you. This is the thing that I struggle with that frustration, is the film tells you in the film why, right? Smith as Neo's boss. So Warner Brothers are making Tom and his boss, who's like, he's the CEO, and Tom is obviously the lead dev, the game designer. They're making them make a sequel. And basically they said, we'll make it with or without you guys. Like, if you don't do it, we'll make it without you. And Smith says, that's the thing about stories. They never really end, do they? We're still telling the same stories, just with different names, different faces. And I have to say, I'm kind of excited. After all these years, to be going back to where it all started. Back to the Matrix. And then we get a montage. And just really quickly, I'll talk about where that goes. But I love in the montage that the two top brand notes for the Matrix sequel is original and fresh.
Oh, so right, yep.
Scathing.
The random montage with Martha Jones from Doctor Who.
Yeah. And all of the people that he works with, they talk in like internet words. It's all acronyms and WTFs and memes and buzzword. None of it fucking means anything. And there's references. I made a list of the references in the montage. Neo eats steak and red wine, like from the first film. His colleague is reading Alice in Wonderland. That's Martha's character, as in Follow the White Rabbit. Trinity is into motorcycles in the Matrix, just like Keanu Reeves is in real life, just like Trinity was in the original trilogy. Morpheus goes to the window, and he repeats Morpheus's line from the original, which is like, at last. Agent Smith wakes up, and then the first line he says is, Mr. Anderson, I've missed you. Which is from the third film. And then the black cat that the analyst has is called Deja Vu, which is obviously a reference to the ending of the first film, where we get the black cat and the crew gets pinned in.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a bunch of Matrix shit thrown at you. And the to tie this all together, right? At the on the back of the bathroom stall door at work, as Neo goes to the bathroom, there's graffiti that says, "It is so much simpler to bury reality than it is to dispose of dreams."
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah,
The
it's
hell?
like a split second. Yeah.
Okay.
But what I like,
you were like pausing and starting during this, weren't you? Looking
Yeah,
at all the little details.
yeah, I did my usual methodology. I spent way too much time on this, but yeah, it's the thesis then comes from Bugs in the end, where she says that's what the Matrix does. It weaponizes every idea, every dream, everything that's important to us. We're better to bury the truth than somewhere as ordinary as a video game. So, like, there's a bunch of stuff happening here at a meta level, like we kind of already started talking about, which is the film talking about itself and talking about what it means to make this thing now. And I think you're right, Mitchie. I would have liked to see like an earnest film that was set in the universe doing other things, but I also really appreciate that if you're going to do this and do it, as Pat said, in bad faith, the amount this film focuses on the same topics that the previous films did, and particularly the first one, right? Which is like the sense that there's a disreality to the world. And at the time, it was thinking about the ways that, the late 90s to early 2000s finance and economy, and America's like big swing toward conservatism and all of those things, just like the crushing weight of all of that to the everyday worker. That is now vectored into the newest crises caused by capitalism, which is social media and like the obliteration of meaning, and exactly what this film is, which is like heartless reboots and cash grabs of old stuff just to farm money off things people remember. So it's doing the same thing that a new Matrix film now would do in the same way the old Matrix film did at the time. The difference is the Matrix exists now and it didn't back then. If that makes sense.
Right. And ironically, it was a box office loss, wasn't it? I believe.
That wouldn't surprise me. That wouldn't surprise me. God, Lana's going to be
Budget of
happy.
190 million and box office of 160.
Ah, that's awesome.
Okay.
That's awesome.
That's so cool.
So
It's yeah.
there's
Sorry.
a parallel there to the first film of societal commentary. The thing that's missing though is like the, for lack of a better term, the spiritual angle. Like, that I guess that's the heart and the earnestness of the first one. It's like this. It is more than concrete money. The revelation of taking the red pill. As I said in that first podcast, that is a trick you can only pull one time. Once you take the red pill, there isn't another layer to see, or if there is, it just doesn't hit the same. And you'd be pretty hard pressed to recreate that kind of feeling as it did when the first film came out. But if it's just about, oh, look how terrible life is now, look at all these like sort of new challenges that we have as a society, with all the loss of meaning and whatnot, but it just I feel like it doesn't provide anything more than that, and that's why it kind of gives off this a bit of a sour taste.
Yeah, well, I guess that's Lana's kind of thinking about, isn't it?
Yeah,
just being sour, and I don't know, it's kind of cool, I suppose. Like, so it feels like, all to me, like some sort of defiance of like, Warner Brothers, and it's like itself a commentary on that, on movie industry and whatnot. But like, I don't know, like, would you do that? Like, you made a trilogy, and it's a great trilogy that's gonna go down in the halls of cinema, and then when it comes to making a fourth film and there are issues with the production studio and stuff like that, you kind of just like, not ruin it, but like you tarnish the original reputation, all for the sake of like just challenging some studio that's not eternal, like how films will live on. the idea of the Matrix trilogy will be something that will probably it'll last a lot longer than whatever this clout is about and all this kind of conflict between the studio and directors and whatnot. And I don't know, it just kind of like feels like a waste to me, you know. Feels, I don't know, not right, which is the point.
Yeah, as an artist, you don't think about your works in the same way that the audience do. Producing a new Matrix film doesn't change anything about the original Matrix films. As the artist who like, if you're an artist that makes stuff,
I think that's very dependent on the artist, though. Surely.
Yeah, I'm speaking from. Okay, maybe I should say this, but from my own discipline as a storyteller and a writer. The books I've written will always be the books I've written. And if someone doesn't like another book in the series and they feel that ruins the rest of the series, that says more about their understanding of self.
No, but would you do that? Would you deliberately write a sequel to your books that kind of, you know, is shit, that it ruins the story of the original and you tarnish your own creation in that way?
The second part of that sentence isn't possible. So like, I might do it, but it wouldn't, there's no way to ruin the originals because they still exist. You can still go watch them. They're still great. Doesn't change.
That's like saying that the stories don't link together and that sequels have no meaning or impact on preceding films or stories. Like, well, I don't know. I mean, sure, that I can't argue with you on that, but like, to me, it feels like if I were to make a fourth production of something and I had made 3 or whatever the number would be, to me, you know, I would try and do right and make sure that the fourth one doesn't tarnish the first one.
That's what I'm saying. Is you can't. That's not possible. So it's not a consideration.
What do you mean it's not possible?
You can't. That's not how art works. Objects in time and space, right? You made those 3 films. People really love them. You make a new one that people don't like. That has nothing to do with. That doesn't. You can't change. That's not how that works. You can't change time. The fact that those are still good and you can go back to them. Knowing that the Hobbit trilogy is bad has absolutely zero impact on my enjoyment of Lord of the Rings.
Like the effect for some people when they see a film in a franchise is that it recontextualizes the earlier films and then it ruins it for those particular individuals, is what you're saying, Mitchie, right?
Yeah, I'm not, and I think this is ultimately subjective. I don't think there's an absolute. I mean, it's art, right? It's interpretable in many different ways.
But you asked me, and my answer is like, for me, that's not a consideration.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah, like,
but
I get what you mean.
But yeah, if I were the artist sitting in this position, I don't know how I'd feel about doing this. Is my point. But you know, I'm not the one sitting in the position, so I wouldn't know. But it just feels a little weird.
It's a good point.
Perhaps Lana. I mean, that probably is in her mind. I reckon another dimension is that she has the expectation that a lot of people who watch this are people like David who who can divorce the original films from this one, and they are mutual in their relationship with the individual.
Yeah, so, I've obviously been, I've been doing, God forbid, Star Wars podcasts for like 4 years now with
how's the Acolyte?
It's not great.
Yeah, I've heard it's pretty bad.
One of the biggest hurdles to overcome with those guys was at a discipline level, trying to help them overcome that feeling that you're describing, Mitchie, which is like, well, it's bad and it ruins the original. For example, maybe the sequel trilogy, you feel that ruins the original. Being able to take text as it is and understand that you can still look at that original text, analyze it, and find enjoyment, and then simultaneously look at the new text, funnel that context across the original works, the original trilogy in this case, the original 6 films, analyze those and produce outcomes. And you can do all of that, and then you can look at the sequels as individuals. You can do all of that to inform your perspective, understanding, and produce new meaning without any of those things having to ruin your original enjoyment of any of those particular objects. Because it's about the exercise of producing new meaning from thinking and talking about those pieces of art, and understanding that just because the new one is bad or you dislike it, or exactly what Pat said, which is it might mire their perspective on those originals, that's like an investment or a divestment of yourself into that work, usually because it comes at like a formative age, right? I know for us, The Matrix and The Lord of the Rings, for me at least, they were like really big parts of my childhood. And so in some ways, when this stuff happens, it can feel like someone, you hear this all the time. They say, oh, they've ruined this thing for they've ruined my childhood because Star Wars is bad now. And it takes a lot of work to overcome that investment of self in media, because the truth is that all franchises, all stories, all kinds of media will have good days and bad days. There'll be good ones and bad ones. And learning to remove your own personal investment and your own sense of self and identity from that media is the first step into gaining that next kind of level of direction, disciplinary wise, right? Now, I understand why people do that, and I understand the reasons that people do that and the reasons they think that way. I find that incredibly unhelpful in understanding art, thinking about stories, telling stories. As a person that does this stuff myself, I find it unbeneficial to me, and so I've worked on moving away from that. And I know a lot of people do the opposite. They move into that, and that becomes their whole way that they understand media. And I appreciate that that's a disciplinary thing at a certain point, right? They go, this is what I'm interested in talking and thinking about. But to square the circle on this part of the conversation, for me, the reason it's not a concern is that it's not a concern I have with other works, let alone my own.
It's funny though, because you're talking about like moving away from like your own self, I guess, when interpreting things like these. But the movie itself feels very personal, at least from the context I've been given today, and the interaction between Lana and Warner Brothers and whatnot. Her decision to kind of like, oh yeah, I'll just make a kind of slapstick film that's not taking itself seriously because Warner Brothers, threatened me to hire another director. It's kind of in some ways very personal. And that's kind of more my point about this, is not whether this actually ruins the original trilogy and what people believe and whatnot, but it's the fact that the director made kind of a conscious decision to go down that path, to kind of make something that's deliberately tongue-in-cheek, slapstick, sure, to challenge the Warner Brothers or whatever the conflict is. And that I can understand that, but like it's just an interesting kind of thing to do, rather than like trying to kind of make another good film. You kind of challenge whatever happened with the direction and the whole ordeal behind it. It's just interesting. Like,
no,
I can't
my
really think of anything like this.
Yeah, that's my perspective too. That's why I really like this film. I think it's so compelling to think about for that reason.
But then to your point about like letting go, it's like this film could have done that and been better that way. Just, like, yeah, all right, Warner Brothers are dicks. They decided to hire another director or something like that. But you don't have to necessarily make the film about that, But I don't know. I don't have the full context, but I feel like that's what's happened with this. It's like just challenging Warner Brothers, right? And the film itself actually obviously comments on that because they mention it. So
yeah, but it's what Pat was saying as well, right? Like it's also like thinking about the moment in time that it's happening and challenging the contemporary moment, which is what the original did as well.
Yeah, but the original did it in a way that would be timeless. But this is the kind of thing that's only relevant in the very small kind of timeline of whatever happened over the last few years, right? And then in 10 years' time, it's going to have very little context and therefore not age well.
That's the point of the film?
Yeah, and sure, that's the point of the film. But that's why I don't think there's really much real kind of depth to it like the first film, which I think we all kind of agree on, that the first film's far superior to this, and like you say, Pat, because this film lacks that spirituality. But it's just interesting, like you just, but then I guess I don't know, like I'm just merely commenting on that, but yeah, I guess it just kind of reinforces the idea that I don't think this is a fantastic film.
It is interesting. You know what, Mitchie, I kind of agree that I think it perhaps speaks to something in Lana's character, that she is willing to sort of throw out the reverence she has for her own baby, like, you know, like.
Can you imagine like Miyazaki doing this or something?
Yeah, exactly. Like,
you know, it depends on but everyone's different, right? So
yeah, like making a film out of spite, basically. Like, like it is. I actually, you know what? That's funny you say that. I could imagine Miyazaki doing that. The petty piece of shit that he is, you know, like.
I actually don't really know. I've heard bad things about him too, so you know, I don't know anything about him. But could you imagine? I don't know who's a Scorsese doing that.
Yeah, I could imagine Scorsese doing that as well.
You reckon?
I can imagine him making a trash superhero film to prove a point.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. Would he? He kind of stays in his own
yeah, that's true.
park. I don't know, like, but anyway, it's like kind of like you know, it's gonna be regretful kind of thing. It's like it's like when you're talking to someone, you're arguing with someone, and you say something really mean to them, and then an hour later you're like, oh, I really shouldn't have said that. It's kind of like that. Like in the moment, it seems like a good idea, but then in the end, it's not.
It's just not very like dignified.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of understand what you mean.
Like you're kind of stooping to that level, I guess. Which, who am I to say that's right or wrong? I'm not going to really comment that's right or wrong. But it's just, you know, that's why this film I don't think is going to be great in the future. You know,
gotta jump in the muck sometimes.
Do you?
Yeah, 100%. If you're gonna fight corporations, you absolutely have to get your hands dirty. On that.
Sorry, I just want one more point. That lack of dignity is also reflected in a certain character that shows up, the Merovingian.
Oh yeah,
it's like a perfect like symbolic.
I don't think I noticed it was
film.
him the first time.
It's a good segue. So the Merovingian's back. He's in exile, right? And he's one of the exiles.
Manky as fuck.
They're forgotten. He's a forgotten relic, and he's my favorite thing ever because he's a boomer. Right, as they do this fight, he's yelling about like we had style, we had conversation, it's all bullshit, and he's just like,
and all the people on their phones these days and stuff.
Kids do be looking at their phones, yeah. He has a diatribe about how everything was better, while the characters in this film that are rehashes of the original have rehashed fights from the first film. So he's like the audience stand-in going, you've ruined the original trilogy, we used to have style and class, you know. It's a bit of obviously lampshading, and that you get the line from Smith that tries to put this all together, right, where he says, I've been thinking about us, Tom. Look how binary is the form, the nature of things. Ones and zeros, light and dark, choice and its absence, Anderson and Smith, and then they have that big dust up, right? But it's sort of like you have it's a kind of worse version of a speech that Smith would have given. Like it doesn't quite have the same dripping pathos. And to be fair, Groff gives it. I think none of the actors in this film are the problem. They all try and turn up as much as they can. I mean, I really like him in this role.
I guess I've never heard you say anything bad about actors though.
That's good.
You quite often say, oh yeah, you know, never the actors to blame.
We never really talk about stuff with bad acting.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it's hard to say anyway. Like, when the movie's bad, what is bad acting, you know?
Well, like bad choices can happen. like bad acting choices can happen. But I mean, yeah, we just because of the nature of the show that you guys do, it's not really something that tends to be on the table. Patrick will tell you.
We never go on about how shit someone's acting in a movie.
I bitch about Foggy's acting once an episode of Daredevil.
Who's that?
He's one of the main characters. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it's like literally one of my complaints.
I have no patience for shit films, which is why we only cover stuff we like on this podcast.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Hit the nail on the head. That's yeah.
Yeah.
We're not really a critical podcast. We're just I don't know. Anyway.
Well, can we talk about the kids do be on their phones thing?
Yeah.
What the Merovingian says.
Well, and then like what it means for the film.
Yeah.
So
and also it's adopting that mindset with like instead of phone calls, when Thomas Anderson gets a phone call, he gets a text, right?
Yeah, and it's actively worse because it's like again,
because it's texting. Yeah,
this
it's not.
film
It
rules.
doesn't have. Although I don't know, that's like one of those things that I quite often comment on. It's like in 20 years' time when we're bloody communicating to each other with chips in our brains, you know, and texting's like a totally obsolete thing of the past. Maybe this will look cool. It's just because we see the Matrix now, it's like, oh, they're on their phones. That's cool because we tend to look at things that
Right,
are
but that's not-
old-fashioned as cool.
Lawrence Fishburne in your ear as you dart between cubicles. Oh, all time.
Yeah, that was cool when it came out too, 100%.
You know. Okay, so the kids do be on their phone. Obviously, a lot of this film is thinking about social media and kind of like the obliteration of attention and reality. And the thing that the analyst says is that in his new Matrix, the worse that you get treated, the more we manipulate you, the more energy you produce, which is social media, but instead of energy, it's money. I've been setting productivity records every year since I took over, and the best part, zero resistance. People stay in their pods, happier than pigs and shit. Again, kids do be on social media, huh? And the way this ends up shaking out in the film is that there's this concept of like the swarms, where someone is identified as a target, and it sort of amorphously sweeps through a crowd of people, and they chase someone down, they hunt them down, right? Which is, Patrick, on social media, what would that be?
I'm sorry. I'm so lost. What are you describing right now? Like in terms of the actual film? Like what?
The zombies.
There's,
The
you know, the
zombies.
swarms. There's where people
When
let
they
their
start
eyes
jumping
go
out the
crazy,
windows and shit.
and the end of the film
As-
becomes a zombie
yeah.
flick.
As I mentioned, haze, but yes, yeah, okay, I do recall that now. Yeah.
Yeah,
and
there's something about this movie, eh?
If dude, honestly, and if the film is saying that kids do be on their phones and all this stuff is about social media, the swarm would be
I don't know, algorithms or something, like ads, just like attention, the attention economy stuff.
I kind of assumed it was like cancel culture. Like the second you step a toe
Why are
out
you
of
asking
line,
just Pat and not me?
this one, because I was assuming Pat had read my mind, but he forgot what happened in the film. So, I don't know. Well, what does the swarm stuff do for you then, Mitchie? Because it's kind of like just there in the background. It's so weird.
Well, it's an extension of what they comment on in the original trilogy, right? But yeah, you're right. If you want to extrapolate that into like a more kind of modern setting of cancel culture, fair enough. But in the first film, in the iconic red dress scene, Morpheus talks about how, you know, even though these people are who we're trying to liberate, they're also our enemies as well until they realize otherwise. And it's kind of an extension of that to me. Like, you know, a bunch of people plugged into the Matrix that don't want to see the other side, don't want to open their mind. I don't know. I don't know if it's really any more of a development than that, than literally manifesting it in a movie. In the first Matrix films, they don't do that. Aside from using like the police and stuff like that, right, who fight along with the agents and the, so to speak, just as brainwashed as the rest of the people in the Matrix, and they like believe that Neo and all that are like criminals, and so they just kind of embodied that more literally by having a literal swarm of people.
Yeah, which I think you're right. It's a continuation of that, but obviously, like we were saying before, like it's the moment is different, so it's commenting on something different. But and Smith even says that in the film. Again, this film just tells you everything you need to know about the film in the film, where it's toward the end, and he's talking to Neo. He goes, "You know the difference between me and you, Tom? Anyone could have been you, whereas I've always been anyone. So anyone could be the one, or Neo, right? Whereas the agents, the threat in the system, they've always been anyone. They're not a particular individual. Like, they're not a person, which is the same thing as a swarm, kind of. It's like the same thing as cancel culture. There's no one person making that choice. It sort of happens.
Right. Okay. I mean, actually, there's a swarm in the second movie. It's Smith.
True.
Or the third one.
Both.
Very, very similar. Yeah, both. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I didn't even thought about that.
Like, that's, yeah, I don't know.
But I guess the difference is he's a program with like thoughts and feelings, whereas the swarm, the way that Bugs describes it, is like it's just like a switch that gets flipped, and they just target whoever the target is.
It's different, yeah.
Yeah, it's like there's no thought behind it, I guess, is the film's argument.
In this one, yeah. Because in the
in this
second and
one.
third one, it was meant to be like a virus and has analogies with computer, you know, IT and stuff like that.
Yeah.
This
Well,
just
and
feels
he has like a
zombies.
philosophy. Yeah, they're mindless zombies, right? Which is kids do be on their phones, huh? What I kind of like about where this tries to go is to Pat. You said something before that I want to dig on a little bit, like dig into, which is the film not really offering like a alternative to all of this cynical bad faith stuff. I feel like it walks up to the line of thinking about it and then it walks away, which is like the kind of ending sequence where you get the big zombie swarm and they're all kind of running away, and Bugs jacks into the Matrix to save her crew, and she, you know, they do a great, they do it, I was going to say a great big action scene, but I don't want to be confused that I think it's a great action scene. But she comes in and she saves her crew, and there's this moment where they just like pull each other into these big embraces, like just full body hugs, like just, you know, bring each other together and locking their arms around each other. And I feel like that combined with the stuff with Trinity toward the end, if this film had like wanted to do this stuff, I think it could have almost found a way to make it feel like there was an alternative in some way, right? Because even Niobe, when Neo meets her back in Io, you know, she has that line about, you know, you forget about this, and she points up, you know, silence, right? Like stepping away from that stuff and having, and like if they tied those together somehow, like that idea of you leave these, in the modern context, these platforms and these manipulations and these places that are designed to hurt you to make profit, and then you take a step back and you connect with people and connect with loved ones. I think they could have found that spiritual angle. I just think the film, as you guys have already said, has no interest in doing that.
Well,
you know.
okay, I'm gonna defend myself here. To be fair, that's kind of what I pitched in that digression collection thing. Because my thing, if I recall, it's finding authenticity in the fact that it's irrelevant, like whether you're in the Matrix or not. Like, you know, I think I was also saying that, like, you know, perhaps he discovers that there is this sort of like recursive, infinite, like omnidirectional Matrix.
You did say that. Yeah. That it goes in both directions forever.
Yeah. And so, and if that is the case, then what is real and authentic is just what, like, you know, it's in your head, it's what you make it to be. And, you know, you could take that to a cynical place, like Cypher, like maybe that's not cynical, but it's, you know, it's sort of like, oh, well, I know that this isn't real, but I'm going to embrace it as reality anyway. It's more of a, no, I know what's real, and I know what, you know, what I need to live happily and self-actualize and that sort of stuff. So yeah, if this movie's direction was something like making a parallel between authenticity and you know, escaping the Matrix, then I feel like, yeah, that I mean, one, that you know, is a there's some cohesion there, and also that's you know, it's kind of what I was trying to say, at least, anyway. Yeah.
No, yeah, I agree. My point is, like, some of the elements are here, they just don't do anything with them. Like, if they wanted to take that stuff and run with it, it's kind of scattered here. Like, when Bugs wraps her crew in an embrace, it's in the Matrix. You know, it's all in the source.
Yeah, I don't remember that part. What's happened? They're getting swarmed by the swarm or something, and they're like,
is that with the car? The car flips over and they got to shoot out of it.
Yeah, and she jacks in to save them. Her and her.
The classic Trinity thing to do.
Yeah, and then she saves
always
them.
Sitting around with the operator, and then she's like, "Nah, I got to go in."
Well, Neo specifically well, so her role to knock. The reason she's not going in is she's supposed to pull the plug on Neo if Trinity chooses to stay, because that's the bargain, remember?
Yeah.
So she's supposed to stay out of it, and then she chooses to jump in to save her friend. I guess after the plan is already broken bad and the fighting started. So maybe the risk is gone at that point.
I was there when you died. I said to myself, here is the anomaly of anomalies. What an extraordinary opportunity. First, I had to convince the suits to let me rebuild the two of you. Why her? Getting there, and don't worry, she can't hear me. Resurrecting you both was crazy expensive. Like renovating a house. Took twice as long, cost twice as much. I thought you'd be happy to be alive again. So wrong. Did you know hope and despair are nearly identical in code? We worked for years trying to activate your source code. I was about to give up when I realized
Trinity.
it was never just you. Alone, neither of you is of any particular value. Like acids and bases, you're dangerous when mixed together. Every sim where you two bonded, let's just say bad things happened.
Shall we talk about the analyst?
Yeah. Old mate.
Yeah, old mate Neil Patrick Harris. I don't have much to
That's right.
start on him, but I just want to, because I know David, you'll have something. What is his role in this film?
He is the architect misremembered. He is like the architect remembered through like fogged over glass. You know, he's rather than the previous architect who designed this beautiful thing that like was perfect, and then he had to take out some of that perfection. Yeah. This guy is he's the algorithm. He keeps you in line. And he makes you suffer, and you like it, and you don't resist. And my take on the analyst is he is like a corruption of everything about the original Matrix that was philosophically interesting, and flattened into just like kind of a nothing. Like there's some stuff here to pick at, right? His plan, because we haven't really said this, it was in the summary a little bit, but so his new Matrix, built off the back of the old one. Again, recall that Sati made this guy not green anymore, so there was some material change in the cycle. His plan is he brings back Neo to put him into the Matrix to generate energy, and he discovers that every time that he puts Neo and Trinity in the same Matrix together, regardless of the context, it always ends in revolution. So instead, what he does is develops this way to disguise them from each other, so that they are in the same simulation, but they're suffering because they feel like something's missing, but they can't action what that is. And that's the same for everyone else in the Matrix. They're all suffering in some similar way. And he's got like an aberration of bullet time, the thing that made the original film, like one part of it that made them so cool.
And they don't actually use it either.
No.
Which is also interesting.
Yeah. Well, because I guess like Neo can't use bullet time anymore because his powers are now different because it's a different Matrix.
But yeah, I mean, they don't even use it as a film technique, right? There is no bullet time in the whole movie.
No, it's basically slow mo ramping, and composite
it's
footage.
just standard slow mo. Which, yeah.
Well, but to your point, like it's like it's not even like it's not actually slow mo. They're just speeding and slowing down footage, and then compositing frames. They're not even doing like actual slow mo shooting.
Yeah.
So it's even worse than that, Mitch. It's like a slightly different, worse version of that, which is great. But yeah, I like that the analyst is his psychiatrist, and that his whole goal is to like keep convincing Neo that the things he's seeing aren't real. And yeah, I think him being able to summon the swarms feeds into some of that stuff, like if he's the algorithm, etc. However you want to think about how that allegory works, but him being an active villain here versus kind of keeping Trinity as a pet almost is creepy and weird, but less effectual than the standoffishness of the architect. Like it's more sinister. But
okay, so in terms of like the actual diegetic plots connecting the third one and this one, so what happens based on the Wikipedia summary is that Neo and Trinity died, and because Neo brought peace, between the robots and the humans, and then they struck a deal where any human that wanted to be released could be released. A bunch of humans got released, and then there was insufficient power to feed the machines, and then there was a machine civil war. And then the way to solve that was that the analyst had this pitch, which he pitched to robot emperor, and said, "Look, I think I can make a better Matrix and solve our energy crisis. I have this cutting edge new way to do it." And that was, if the analyst was this cold, calculating. The architect. I mean, they're both cold and calculating. That isn't the right term. If the architect is a mathematical arbiter of reality, then the analyst is this messy humans psychological exploiter. He revels in the everything that is anti-quantitative. He loves the turmoil and the sheer creativity and the illogicalness of the human mind, and that is what he models this new Matrix on. So I suppose that accounts for this film, what this film is interested in, what it focuses on. This, the messy complications of this new reality in the 2020s, which is all about subjectivity and meaning and stuff like that. It's much far less concerned with the precision of, I don't know, universal truths, more about just the getting lost in a maze of human noise and stuff like that. Yeah. Right.
Which is I guess that's the shift, right? So I've talked about this. I don't know if I talked about it in this series. I probably did. In the early 2000s, we all kind of assumed that the world would be a technocracy. We'd put experts in positions of power doing the things they're good at, and that would just be how society works, and the architect is that. Now, a lot of people's engagement with reality is through the algorithms and through the phones and through the platforms and stuff, and the analyst dominates subjectivity in the same way Smith sought to and failed. The analyst has figured it out. It's not about homogenization, it's about sensationalization and pain, and making people have a reaction that produces more energy, right? The suffering of that produces more energy. It's more beneficial for him, for you to be suffering, than it is for you to have silence and to be able to step aside and have those relationships and connections, which is the whole point of his Matrix. It's built around the premise of separating Trinity and Neo. That's the fundamental underlying mechanism, is keeping two people apart and inflicting suffering on both them and the rest of the system to produce that energy.
Mm-hmm. I'll say it. It's a bit contrived.
Yeah, it's my least favorite part of it. It's I think it's the least interesting and least that. But that's what I said. He's a worse version of all of those ideas.
Yeah.
It's a carbon copy of a carbon copy of a carbon copy.
It's interesting how you can fold that back into the justification of the film's, the film's ethos. But then when you actually watch it, as I said, it's this haze. There's no cohesion, and because everything is built off of this foundation of that exact contrivance, and it's if the point of watching the movie is to figure that out, then it doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room for your imagination, I feel, as the original films do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of self-solves. I don't know, Mitchie, what about you? How do you feel about the kind of premise of the villain, I guess, or the kind of overall setup that side of it, like the analyst and the kind of Neo Trinity stuff.
I remember last podcast I tried to guess how they came back. Neo and Trinity.
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
because I hadn't watched it in a while, and then obviously now I know. I couldn't believe that they literally, and I should have known given that it's a title. They literally resurrected them from death. Like it's just like what a like you can't think of anything. You just like, yeah, we'll just resurrect them from death, and we'll chuck in the scene where they're in a pool of like in a vat of gooey shit and they're suffering because it hurts to be resurrected. And this is the first time it's ever happened. Like, I don't know, it's just kind of lazy, isn't it? And that's kind of his whole shtick, right? Like, he figures out a way to resurrect them. And, and you start off with that, and I don't know, it kind of just then sets up, for me, his character, which kind of feels all a little bit kind of pointless, I mean, but then I guess it needed a villain, and it couldn't be Smith, so they made up this guy who's like some sort of, like, say, some sort of version of the architect.
It is pretty disturbing, though. I'll give him that.
Yeah, he's creepy.
Oh, when you, yeah,
like
true. And that scene when they get resurrected is also pretty cooked.
Yeah, it's like kind of a body horror at the moment.
Yeah,
it's real weird.
Yeah.
I like the way that he kind of like he's kind of mewling, right? Like he's sort of there's something really like pathetically verbose and kind of lavishing in his villainy, in a way that Smith was never. Smith was passionate, but he never lavished in his villainy. Same with the architect, whereas he enjoys toying with Neo and toying with Trinity in a way that we haven't really seen yet.
There's a thing about like putting an idea like that in a story, like where you just open up this idea that people can be resurrected from the dead. It's very interesting because like I don't know if it like I can't think right now off the top of my head where like there are stories like that where it does it particularly well, but like resurrection as an idea, it's very I don't know, obviously it's like a hallmark of a lot of stories, right? Like Christianity and stuff, but and religion, but like it's just kind of like it doesn't work a lot of the time, because I feel like you just kind of like when you take away the finality of death from a story, it makes it very difficult to be invested in anything. It's just, I don't know, to me it's just like such a terrible way to bring him back. Like I think it's just totally lazy and just pointless, like any other way than that, like and then they have the Matrix at their fingertips. They have like virtual copies and whatnot and machines and all that, like any sci-fi story, any sci-fi method to kind of bring them back, but like to literally resurrect them, it's like an interesting choice, I suppose, at the end of the day.
Well, I mean, there is a bit of sci-fi explanation. They're grafting them or whatever, they've mapped their brains or whatever,
True.
You pitched that,
so that's how it worked.
Last episode, you were like, I bet like they have copies of their brains in the Matrix or something.
I did. Yeah, because I literally couldn't remember. I didn't realize, though, that they just kind of bring him back to life.
No, I realized that's not what you were suggesting. I just think it's interesting that you kind of guessed that would be part of it.
Yeah, because it's almost like I mean, maybe it's more indicative of like a push against what generally you see. Like you generally are satisfied with some sort of explanation, right? Even if it is in some sort of cooked, vague sci-fi way. And so when they kind of bring this out where there's like very little explanation, it's just straight up resurrection. It's actually kind of like interesting. It sort of actually kind of works with the whole tone of the movie, I think.
You know what
movie?
I'm
going on about this a lot.
You know what movie does resurrection really good?
What's that?
Avengers Endgame.
Wait, who gets?
Like everybody.
They bring all the characters back.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Back in time, right?
I'm sort of half joking, but sort of not.
I
think
there's been a trope in cinema around like someone falls off a cliff and you don't see the body land or whatever, that kind of thing, where it's like they dodge the death. To me, it's more interesting. More interesting is not the right word. to me, I find it's more compelling to think about, like we've just been talking through, that they actually kill them and bring them back to life, versus like, oh no, Neo was never actually dead. He was just on
Yeah.
bypass or whatever, or like, you know,
That's a good idea. Yeah. That's a good
Yeah.
point.
so like
that they
it's-
survived. They literally made that conscious choice. They could have depicted like some sort of flashback scene where it turns out that like Neo's still got like a very very weak pulse, and Trinity, they find her in a wrecked ship and she's still alive too, and
Right.
then they revive her from there. But nah, they died. We're gonna bring them back to life from death.
well, that Mitchie, they're bringing back a dead franchise, so why not bring back the
Yeah.
dead characters?
Yeah,
And they're
I guess.
I'm not saying it's
horribly
good.
mutilating them in the process.
Yeah, that's some
Yeah.
like real like 70s sci-fi shit. I was specifically thinking about Aragorn going over the cliff in the way that that's portrayed in the films, and how that doesn't really feel
Oh, yeah.
cheap, because like, you know, it's a restoration fantasy. He's gonna come back and be the king. Like, you know, he's not dead, but it's about the impact it has on the other characters more so than it is about the gimmick of him maybe being
I
dead.
totally forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good use.
Yeah,
of
he,
that.
he gets he rides the warg right off the cliff or something like that.
Right, and then his
Yeah,
horse.
and then he floats
saves him.
downriver.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah.
you know, speaking of, I suppose the Gandalf resurrection is pretty creative as far as resurrections go. He sort of dies and then gets resurrected by the god of that universe in order to like fulfill a purpose. You know,
That shit's fucking epic.
now that I'm describing
that
it, I
scene is
suppose
fucking
that has
epic.
been copied a bunch of times since. But yeah,
yeah, but I mean that's how genre works, right? Like
yeah.
It's because, like, you know, in these cases there is no like final death, but in Matrix Revolutions they killed them, you know, and we see that. So
okay, well,
it's very hard to come back from that.
I think that's true, but I also think that Gandalf, when he comes back, is a different dude,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah, that's the thing.
he has a slightly different character.
Hey, he's changed color as
No,
well.
but, yeah,
literally
well-
physically different.
well,
Yeah.
yes, literally physically different. But I was trying to delineate from the film we're watching on purpose, so I didn't mention the physical thing because that's what they have in common, which is that they're different. They look different now. But he has a different perspective, right? He is seen through and into time and into his own death, and he understands his own purpose. And so he's much more couched and measured and wise, right? Whereas the characters, and this is my biggest gripe, was when they bring them back to life, because of the mechanism of they had to take the imprints from the Matrix, they're the same people they were, right? There's no distance they haven't moved at all from where they were as people. The only difference is the powers they manifest in the Matrix, right? I would have loved if the kind of characterizations that we get of these characters as they realize who they actually are and they wake up, if the machines got some of it slightly wrong. Like maybe Neo's really like, I don't have a good idea of what that would be, but like maybe Neo's really argumentative or like really verbose in a way he never was before. And somehow
True.
Trinity's different as well. And then it could justify itself in the story that like there was a reason
Yeah.
to bring them, you know?
You know what would fit with like the mode of this film is if he was like a kind of caricature of Keanu himself. Like if he was just like more, if he was just John Wick blended with like surfer Keanu from Point Break.
Oh my God. Point
and,
Break.
like, yeah.
Isn't that sort of what they did with Morpheus?
Yeah.
Kinda.
The kind
Yeah.
of caricature of
kinda,
the
yeah.
original one, right?
Oh,
like
yeah.
he dresses like, you know, in fancy suits, but like totally bright colors, and then he's a bit quirkier.
I mean,
Definitely.
that's actually that's a good point. Like they do that with Morpheus, don't they? And then nothing else. And then Morpheus just does nothing else in the movie.
I guess at least they give us something with Niobe. Like they show us that, you know, we get to see how this world has changed who she is from the end
Yeah,
of that third
what's
film.
all this about? Like no more Zion, and then they got to have a new one called Io, and they're growing strawberries.
I mean, do you fuck with strawberries?
Uh,
I like strawberries.
Yeah, no, I love strawberries. Is fuck with like I love them or I hate them.
Love them.
I saw that hesitation.
So that
David.
I
Like,
saw
I can't
that
believe he's never
sliver
heard
of
this term before.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Oh, I was googling IO.
Tiny bit
to
of
see-
frustration.
I was googling IO. That was not directed at you. I apologize.
Bloody Mitchie.
I'm
Yeah,
assuming
no, I love strawberries.
it's continuing
so
on
it's-
with the theme of ancient cities.
It's actually
Yeah, what is Io? Because
it's a
aside
bit-
from a moon of Jupiter.
So Io was a princess in Greek myth who was loved by Zeus. Zeus changed her in order to hide from Hera, much like the city of Io is hidden from its enemies by an illusion. And Io is also an acronym for input-output in programming. And it's also, it's 1 and 0, is 2 in binary numbers, in line with the naming of the machine city 01. This could mean that Io represents the second... I'm reading from the trivia of the thing, by the way. This could mean that Io represents the second chance for the machines and humans to coexist together peacefully. Io is also the middle letter of Zion, with the first and last letters cut off, perhaps a reference to having no beginning and no end, and or forming from the remnants of Zion, which is what we talked about last time with the breaking of the wheel and the forging of another wheel.
There you go. A lot of connections.
There you go. We squared the circle thanks to matrix.fandom.com. Keep up the good work, boys.
All right. Does anyone have anything else?
I wrote one thing in my notes, which I feel like is a pretty good analogy. This movie feels like metastasis to Breaking Bad.
Say more.
Is that an episode?
Sorry, I worded that poorly, but
that's like the
Metastasis,
knockoff Breaking Bad. Yeah, yeah.
What?
yeah, I think it's Colombian
Yeah.
production.
What's it called?
And metastasis, and it's basically a literally just word for word recreation of Breaking Bad.
Yeah,
They
someone
recreate
copied
all the scenes.
Vince's homework.
Yeah,
Oh my
they
God.
literally do it all identically, but it's all in Spanish and it's terrible.
How have I never heard of
I've
this?
I've watched a lot of kind of YouTube breakdowns of it, of like them being played side by side because they got the exact same scenes, and it just like highlights to you how little tiny differences in production can make huge impacts on how things are perceived, right? Like just where you position the camera. Like obviously you two know this, being people that have kind of studied this stuff, but like you know, I just kind of never really thought about it like that, but this kind of feels like that, you know. It's like, I don't know, just a shitter version of the original. But then that's the point, I guess, is the difference. Although I feel like that's the point with Metastasis too. Surely they didn't make that thinking that it's great. Like,
Yeah,
you never
yeah.
know,
I
do you?
mean, a lot of things in this film was like a deliberate and some indeliberate bastardization of this abstract, you know, Matrix film that exists in culture.
yeah.
Yeah, it's true. I thought to round out the coverage, can I share my screen and play you guys something that I did this week? Because I think you'll appreciate it. I think it'll put a nice capper on our experience here.
Yeah.
All right.
So I was in Sydney this week. I did something really dumb for like half a day. So this is what I did. Sources and additional notes can be found at zeroindent.com. This essay was written in collaboration with A Method to the Madness. This week I put on my biggest, longest coat and glasses and got on a plane to Sydney in order to visit St. James where they filmed the train station scenes. This monk sat next to me. He wisely kept his own counsel.
Next stop, St. James.
What struck me the most about St. James is how perfectly unchanged the place felt. While they filmed on an abandoned platform in the film, all of the light fixtures and tile material remain stoic in their consistency. The reflections even glance off the surfaces in the same way as the film. I sat in the train station for an hour talking into my microphone, opining about what the Matrix means to me personally, and how alien being in such a place came to feel. The sensation of breaking of the wheel to forge anew, and yet here stands the same tiles and brick captured on those cameras so long ago, entirely unchanged. the rare, prescient, physical artifact of such an important piece of art in my life carries weight, a physical, inescapable kind of weight, and it sat atop me and devoured me. Wandering the empty city streets below the cubicles and offices and so much empire, I found myself in a kind of cosmic stupor. The words I'd written now shaping the here and the now in a kind of echo chamber that was real and not real at the same time. I recorded an audio diary of the entire trip. You can find this for free on Patreon right now by going to patreon.com/zeroindent.
Very cool, David. Very cool.
It was very fun. I was there for like 2 hours. I have to be honest, the thing that I couldn't get over is like, and the phone footage doesn't do it justice, but like where the tiles. So what they did is there's a station. Basically, you go up the staircase, and there's a station to the left that like you can't get to anymore, and so it's literally on the other side of, which is the wall. That wall there. The other side of this wall is where they filmed it.
Okay.
So it's as close as you can physically get without like trying to trespass or whatever. But it was extremely cool. And I put my Matrix sunglasses on and I put my big coat on. I represented this podcast at St. James train station.
You went LARPing.
I went, oh my god, I went like, yeah.
What is LARPing again?
Live action role playing.
Yeah.
Ah. Right.
I did a Matrix LARP. I just thought I'd share that with you. I went and I sort of got myself a slice of IRL Matrix to take home with me as a memorabilia for our coverage.
Yeah. Something about visiting where things were filmed, especially when it's something you actually like.
It was really weird, like, especially because it's a film that's been in my life for such a long time. You know, that original trilogy, that going there and just kind of like, it's hard to explain, but thinking about what the film meant to me as a kid and like the ways that the sci-fi aspect of it connected me to my father, and then coming back to it now, being the same age that he was when I was born, I just started thinking about all these things I hadn't really. And so that audio diary that I kind of recorded was a really odd experience because I was kind of, and I don't do this a lot. Usually I try and write about the media that I feel something about, but to talk about my personal involvement in it was really weird and new. And I think that doing this stuff with you guys kind of unlocked that as a possibility for me. And yeah, it was just a really unique experience that I'll never have an experience like that again. So just wanted to share. I went there. Apparently I LARPed, which now that Pat says it, wish I'd come with a cooler framework than that. But that is what happened. And it was awesome. So
did you go to the fountain?
I did. I went to the fountain the next day. And then I went to the street where the red dress scene is filmed.
Yeah, that's the fountain.
Well, they're two.
I'm talking about.
In Sydney, there's
Which
two.
Which fountain are you talking about?
In Sydney, it's not. They're two separate locations.
Yeah.
So it's the street is there, and then you go to a different place, and that's where the fountain is.
Right. But she walks in front of the red fountain, does she?
Yeah. So, okay, so what I'm saying is...
I don't even know where it is. Like,
yeah.
I need to go see it next time in Sydney.
It's just in the city. It's like literally directly in the middle of the city. I'm explaining this poorly. So like, you know where it cuts back to Neo and there's people bumping into him?
Yeah, at the start of it.
Yeah, that's that stuff happens in a different location than the rest of it. So the street itself is somewhere else, but yeah, the fountain you can still go to. And I did. It was great.
See, so and this is I'm going to Saudi Arabia to live out my dune LARPing fantasies. So
that tracks. Yeah.
Are you actually?
No.
Oh.
That's so funny. We can find you other desert. We have desert in our country.
Yeah, it's not the same.
Yeah, the old Gobi. I went to the glacier that the Interstellar posters put on.
Did you? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, you did tell us that. Yeah.
Wait, sorry, where'd you go?
I think I sent a photo on the chat. The glacier that like Matthew's walking on in the poster of Interstellar and in various aspects of the movie when they're on that like the planet where they get betrayed by.
Where's that?
In Iceland.
You went to
It's
Iceland?
actually a bunch. Yeah, when I
The fuck?
Yeah, when I was in
didn't know
Europe
that.
last.
Yeah, he sent us
It's fucking
he
cold
sent
as
us
fuck.
pickies.
There's like literally a bunch of shit there, eh? That's from movies. I can't recall what else. Like a lot of Game of Thrones is there.
People don't appreciate this about Mitchie. Most of his holiday was just pictures of places where films were. I assume that wasn't the point of the holiday, but that was what you sent to us.
No,
And
I kind of realized it halfway through the holiday. I was like, oh, I wonder what's been filmed here. You know,
Yeah.
I was looking for like the fields from 1917, but I don't know, that didn't look particularly impressive. But then there's I don't know, that bloody glacier. Oh, and like Harry Potter and stuff. You know, the old the viaduct and Dumbledore's grave.
Well, that was the thing about the St. James that was interesting is these days stuff that's filmed on site, like on location, is so rare. It's all sound stages and green screens and stuff. Like, or it's like the Shire where it's really expensive to go and see, but like it's just a fucking train station. And so much of the original Matrix trilogy it's just places that look like every city or like anyway, like there's a mundane quality to those original trilogy films and the way they're filmed. It's really cool that those places still exist and kind of will, in some extent, as long as society looks like the vague shape it is right now.
That's actually a good point back to the Matrix Resurrections, the film we're currently covering. Going on a big tangent there, but you know, like how there's that scene in the bullet train in Japan. It's like it's obviously somewhere on our planet, and it kind of is a bit like of a, I don't know, it's a bit jarring, I suppose, because you say that like, yeah, the original trilogy is very mundane and the city that they're in is like unidentifiable. I don't think it even is identified in the movie, but then in this one they kind of like, I don't know, they have more shots of like the city that Thomas Anderson lives in. I don't know, I didn't check it, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's actually quite a well-known American city or something like that.
It's a blend of Seattle and Chicago.
Right. It's kind of got those qualities of looking like a recognizable place, which obviously is pretty stupid me saying that when I didn't look it up and I don't actually know. But then when it comes to the bullet train scene, it's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure Mount Fuji is in the background, or it kind of does look like Tokyo. And obviously it's Japan because everyone knows bullet trains from Japan. You know, and it kind of ruins that like mundanity in the original films. Well, when I say ruin, you know,
no, I know what you mean.
Get back into that again.
No,
but
no, you're right. But it leaves that behind.
Sure,
you know,
but
that's
yeah. But then if they wanted to do that, then I would have liked them to. I'd like to have seen them just jumping through portals, going into all sorts of cool cities, you know, and just like you know, cameo all the big cities on the planet just for fun. It's just random. Like there's like that random city at the start and then the bullet train, and that's about it. It doesn't delve much further into it. They're kind of like half committed.
The sets of this movie are so shit. Like so shit.
So bad.
Like bro, I hate that bullet train scene. The Merovingian scene, they're in like a jungle gym. Like what the fuck is up with that, bro? Like
Is that?
They're just on a soundstage.
Yeah, I know. Like they put no effort into that.
Except for the bathroom they land in, where they make all this effort to make it look like the train station. So Smith and Neo get into a punch up, and they have their first proper confrontation.
Yeah, in the basement.
And they repeat some of the...
And Neo gets smashed.
Yeah, and they repeat some of the choreography from when, at the end of the first film, Neo and Smith confront each other in the train station while the phone rings, and they do that like standoff where they both like close their knuckles and then they clash and stuff like that. That scene is like a repetition of that, but then so they repeat some of the choreography, and then the rest of it's actively worse on purpose because Neo doesn't have the skills he used to have, and that's when he does the push thing for the first time.
Yeah, right.
But
the old force push.
Yeah, but that set's really detailed. We didn't even talk about the force push yet.
And speaking of the action, actually, why do I find the action in this movie really boring?
Because
did you both perceive it like that as well?
Yeah, there's a million cuts a minute. Like,
yeah.
So the action's bad, but that's like the one thing they could have done really well, right? With a fat budget, and yeah, you know, you wanna ruffle the feathers of Warner Brothers, and so you work all these random things into the plot. But like, you could have had good action.
Yeah, I agree. That is a mystery.
Yeah,
It's terrible.
it's not.
Yeah, I
it's
agree.
just-
That bullet train scene is like dog shit. Like,
It's
honestly.
aggressively mid. Like, it's not terrible. It's just incredibly nothing.
It's just like they blow a hole in the side of it and then they throw people out of it. It's like so like generic. I feel like I've seen that a million times.
Right. That's the James Bond Spectre. Half of the train
Oh,
blows out. People get flying out.
What about the Wolverine? Isn't it the whole bit where they're on top of a bullet train and they're
Are
fighting
they?
each other on that? Yeah, in the Wolverine, the one set in Japan.
I don't remember that film at all.
That's such a random film.
Yeah. Doesn't he fight a big robot man at the end?
Yeah, the dude he saved from the bombing of Nagasaki. Like, it's such a wild plot. Yeah,
because he wants to live forever. Oh my god.
yeah.
I haven't
And
thought
then
about
there's
this.
that the female villain, the one that poisons people. I don't know. I don't read the comics. I don't know, but I think she's
and
quite
then
important from the comics.
Someone mistakes her for a prostitute in her first scene, and she poisons him. Yeah,
I'll take your word for it. I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, I kind of like that movie when it first came out. It's not great, but it's kind of, I don't know.
I'd have to
It's kinda
rewatch it again.
niche.
It could be
It's like
good.
it's like what's with the whole Japanese aspect in it? You know, like like.
Yeah, it is random.
Anyway, I feel like this podcast is a good representation of this movie because we've just kind of not been talking about the movie itself and just getting on some real wild tangents.
Well, I was trying to like wrap us up with a nice bow, and then you're right. The lack of focus. Well, no, but to your point, I think the lack of focus and the lack of like what Pat said, which is just it's like a haze, is my ultimate. I agree with all of that. I still think all of the things that I have talked about that interest me are true, and I find them really interesting as like ideas that are out there in the world. Of course, your mileage is going to vary on whether you like this film, and I don't think anyone is on the other side of this being not great. But I think it's me and a contingent of people who do the kinds of things I do that think and appreciate this in the way that I do, and I recognize that is a vanishingly small percentage of people who watch these films.
All right, I think that wraps it up. I'm not going to say I'm sorry, but I am very grateful that people had to listen through lots of things not relevant to the movie.
Well,
Yeah.
But I think it was
it's up
fun.
to you. It's up to you whether you cut some stuff or not.
You can cut some
Yeah,
bits.
true.
you can
I
not.
might cut some of it. Yeah.
up to you.
But I got to keep some of it. Should we move on to the final bit, conclusion? Plugging. Pat, where can people find us?
People can find us on YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts. We have a website, amttm.com. You can follow our socials from there. If you want to email us, it's mail@amttm.com.
David, where can people find you?
You can find everything I do at zeroindent.com, and you can find my companion essay. So I've been making a companion video essay for each of these podcasts. You can find those over on youtube.com/The Antagonist Essays, or just search for The Antagonist Essays, or just go to zeroindent.com. You'll find a link there. You can find my books at underink.press. If you like the kinds of things I talk about and the things I'm interested in, there's probably something on there that you'll enjoy. And you can also go grab some merch as well if that's something you so desire. But I encourage you to grab this podcast if you enjoyed it and send it to someone you think might enjoy it. Method to the Madness only spreads through word of mouth. So go send it to your friends, your film friends, your nerd friends that you think might enjoy it. Help the boys out.
Yes, thanks very much for listening. And I think that's it. We've concluded the series on the Matrix Quadrilogy. I believe we plan to do the Animatrix, but I don't think that's going to follow in suit like these four did. So thank you very much for joining us during these four movies. I had a great time, and I actually have learned a lot about various things, and also a lot about the Matrix Quadrilogy naturally. And let's see what happens. Maybe there'll be a fifth movie. In fact, I think there will be a fifth movie. So we'll have to cover that when it comes out.
Indeed.
Yeah. As a As Morpheus says at the end of the second film, I have dreamed a dream, but now that dream is gone from me.
See you later.
Bye.